All right, everyone. Well, hello. Welcome to Wine Women and Words. I am Michelle, and with me, of course, is Diana.
Hello.
And this evening, we are going to be chatting with author Claire McMillan. We are here to talk about her latest book, which is Alchemy of a Blackbird. And thank you so much for making some time for us. We're very happy to hear it out with you tonight.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
So, for our listeners who may not yet be familiar with Alchemy of a Blackbird, can you give us a synopsis of what it's about?
Sure. So the book was really inspired by the painter Remedios Varo. She was a surrealist painter living in Paris between wars, and she was there when Paris fell. She fled to a villa outside of Marseille, where a whole group of artists were living, waiting to evacuate France. And she left for Mexico. And when she was in Mexico, she became really good friends with another surrealist painter, Leonora Carrington. And they embarked on this kind of journey of, imagine it in the book, of kind of self-discovery through esoteric practice and occult practice and the tarot. So they're both very well-known painters. And yeah, it's a story about friendship. It's a story about finding yourself. And it's a story about kind of the unseen realms that are all around us.
So I feel like there's so many research rabbit holes that you can go down in this book, and there must have been so many research rabbit holes you went down while you were researching. What was the tarot always going to be part of the story, or did that get, or was actually that, let's back that up. Was the tarot part of the historic record for these artists' life to begin with?
I mean, I don't know about the historic record, but yes, they're both very influenced by the tarot in that Leonora Carrington actually painted a tarot deck that was reissued
Okay.
during the drafting of this book by the Folger Press, which is an occult press in London. And Remedios, the main character, she also has many paintings that reference the tarot. Actually, she has a big exhibit right now that's up at the Art Institute in Chicago. I was actually just there last weekend, and they have a tiny tarot card that she painted on bone,
So
actually.
cool.
Yeah, it was super cool. For me, I started studying the tarot maybe 10 years ago without any idea that it would ever show up in my writing or my work. And what happened was I saw one of Varo's paintings. It's called The Call. It hangs in the National Gallery for Women in the Arts. And I saw this painting and I was just so captured by the painting in a way I'd never really been kind of captured by a piece of art. It kind of like shifted something inside me. And I just wanted to know all about whoever it was who painted this painting. So, I started researching Varo's life without any idea that, again, it would be a book. I just want to know all about her. And as I researched her life, she lived through these very tumultuous historic times in World War II. She was searching for herself. She was a painter, and then she landed in Mexico City and kind of really embraced searching for, transcendence and embraced the tarot. And so as I learned about her life, this kind of interest of mine that already existed in the tarot dovetailed with her life. And that was the moment when I was like, oh, I think maybe this is a book.
I've always found the tarot to be an interesting thing to study. And what's fascinating is how it can be so useful for writers. Writers have used it quite a bit to be able to do their work as well, to help with influencing and whatnot. And you said that you've studied tarot before you started doing this book. Was that something that you did with the tarot?
So I don't use tarot in my creative practice. There's a great book on that, actually, by Jessa Crispin. It's called Creative Tarot. And it's actually, she's a writer, obviously. So it's a great book for writers who want to incorporate tarot into their creative practice. But for me, I really started using tarot as a way to enhance self-inquiry, basically. You know, I was reading, I was taking little workshops. There's a workshop here run by a Gestalt therapist, and you meet every Tuesday morning for 3 months with like a group of women, and you study the tarot. And then I actually went to the Omega Institute in New York and studied with Rachel Pollack before she died, because she wrote this book, 78 Degrees of Wisdom, which was like my favorite tarot book ever. So I was doing all these things, really using it as a way for my own self-discovery, and don't have a calling to be a professional reader or anything like that. But I was reading for friends, reading for family. That was really how my practice intersected with Remedios' life. So, you know, there are tarot definitions in the book at the beginning of some of the chapters, which kind of was a way for me to kind of get my view of how I use tarot in certain contexts into the book.
And I think that is such a really interesting and clever way to bring the tarot into the reading experience for the reader as well. It kind of adds that extra layer of for the reading experience, to be able to get that little extra knowledge beyond just that the characters are involved in tarot. It kind of brings the reader involved in tarot also. I think that was really a neat way to incorporate that.
Oh, well, thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, I kind of was intending for those tarot definitions to really reflect the way that I, you know, use tarot. I don't really use it so much as a divinatory tool, like trying to predict the future, but more, you know, I've explained it as, I think I can get caught in kind of thought loops or rumination, like we all can, about a certain situation. And the tarot is really good, for me at least, for kind of sticking a stick in that thought loop and be like, you know, you can see it from another point of view. And like, here is, you know, a whole other perspective maybe to take on this thing that is looping in your mind.
And another thing that we've talked about in the past, with especially with obviously with historical fiction writers, is that it can sometimes be a really heavy lift for writers to give voices to historical figures or people who have, you know, lived lives in the past, and you're building a fictional world around factual events or or real people. What was that like in the writing experience, not only giving voice to a real person who lived, but also bringing to life such my gosh, my words are just not with me tonight. Such a influential friendship between these two women. I mean, I went down a research rabbit hole on the two of them, and I saw that the picture that Remedios did, the call that you mentioned before. It's a beautiful painting, but
it's so stunning.
It's fluid was the word that came to mind when I saw it. It looks like you can see the robes like billowing in the painting. I thought it was beautiful, but they had such a powerful friendship between the two of them. What was that like to give that a voice in your story?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that question, because that was really the most important part of the story to me, was their friendship, because I feel like, you know, I wanted to portray a female friendship that was close to my experience of female friendship, which is like a rock solid part of your life, you know, people who really lift you up. And so in my research of them, I didn't really find any references to like falling outs or fights or competition or any of this, that they really had this very supportive and collaborative also friendship. You know, we have, I think, a lot of examples of artistic collaboration among men. You know, we have, I put in the book, Andre Breton and Benjamin Perret, or Picasso and Braque, or all these famous men who collaborated. And I kind of wanted to really highlight two influential women who were collaborating. So yeah, their friendship was a really important thing for me to portray. Now, I'm a fiction writer, so I need conflict. So I created like little jagged parts, little conflict in their friendship. That is purely, my imagination. But I needed a little bit of drama because there's no novel about like, and then they were like best friends forever and they never fought and, whatever. But yeah, and as far as giving voice to historical, characters, it is daunting, and, you do your research. And for me, I hope that, I've grounded the emotion in enough research that, it's justifiable. I mean, I think that obviously I've invented dialogue and this sort of things, but yeah, I mean, I would hope that it would ring true for someone who is familiar with her life. And again, it is a novel, it's a piece of fiction, it's a piece of art inspired really by her life. And I go into that obviously in the author note to hopefully give the reader some idea of where I veered off from historical fact and invented things. But yes, it is daunting, and you do your research, and for me too, a novel, I'm picking up a book because I want to take an emotional journey. Like that's the most important and interesting thing to me in any book, is that character, that emotional journey. And so, that is something that's coming from the interior of you. You're putting your emotion into the book, and you're hanging it on a lot of historical fact, but ultimately it's, your own emotion that's coming through.
And for me, when I wrote my books, there were two different experiences with mine. Like I had one where I could know specifically what one of the women that I wrote about was doing on a particular day. Whereas with another one that I wrote, there was very little information on her. For you, with these women, were you able to find a great deal of resources to discuss what their daily life was like, or was that something where you had to really kind of fill in the blanks of the historical record?
I mean, I think for Varro, there's one English language biography, and then a book of her letters and dreams was translated and came out during the writing. So I had kind of those texts that were so close to her, but she died fairly young at 55. So there's not a ton of scholarship in the US and in English on her. So a lot of it, Carrington lived into her 90s. So there's a lot more on Leonora. So there was a lot more to read on Leonora. And then just as you mentioned, they were kind of surrounded by, at least when they were in Europe, they were surrounded by all these other famous people, Max Ernst and Andre Breton and Benjamin Perret and Peggy Guggenheim. And so I could kind of, Frida Kahlo in Mexico City. So I could kind of research those tangential figures as well to get some idea of what was going on with them.
And one, we love talking about multiple POVs on the podcast. That's definitely, I have never tried writing any more than 2 POVs. Diana has done 3. And I love anytime in a book when there's multiple POVs, but they kind of like pop up for one particular piece, and then you just kind of like get to see this different perspective from a character that you're not committing to for the whole book. It's just this one, peek at what's going on through their eyes. How did that weave into the story when you were in the writing process?
Yeah, so thanks for saying that. Yeah, I love like a kaleidoscope POV. That's kind of, because as you guys know, when you're in first or third, you have such limitations, right? And so bringing in those other characters, you get to open it up a little bit. And I actually was thinking so much about Olive Kitteridge. I love that book, and the way Elizabeth Strout kind of does that throughout the book, that you get you understand Olive at the end, right? Because she's given you all the people in her life's like view of Olive. So I was, obviously I didn't do that in my book, but I was thinking about how she had done that. And, I have a third person POV for the main chapters. And then I wanted to have these other people with their tarot card is kind of giving you a bit of a different angle, like a prism almost, into the story and moving the story forward at the same time. So yeah, I mean, I think I drafted most of the third person POV first, and then went back in and kind of chunked out scenes in the third person and be like, actually, this scene could be told by Benjamin, or this scene could be told by Oscar, or whatever, and then redrafted it that way.
And is that the technical term for is it kaleidoscope POV? Is
Oh,
that
I have no idea. I just
I was
made
like,
I have
I
no
didn't know how to
idea.
name.
But
No.
I would be okay with that. I feel like
Yeah, I like kaleidoscope POV should be a thing.
Okay, let's make it a thing.
we're gonna make that a thing. That's going to be
Okay, I like
our,
it.
we talk about this being a masterclass. Well, we have just made our own determination that
Yes.
kaleidoscope POV is now a literary term that you should be studying.
It's a thing.
It's a writing tool. Yes, I think we should just name this like the Wine Woman and Words Writers Masterclass, because it's just so much fun. As much as I love when we talk about books, I love when we talk about the writing process just as much, because it's real. And I have to say, I love your wall of Post-its behind you.
I know. I need to take them down, because I've been on a couple podcasts and everybody's always like, what are those? So yeah, that's a timeline of her life, and also kind of big events in World War II. So I understood like where everything dovetailed. And then that's like this way. And then this way is all like quotes. Because part of the book too, I think, is about the power of like the power and grace of someone who loves you saying like the exact right thing to you at the exact right time, how that can like unlock an entire piece of your heart, yourself, whatever. And so like a lot of these are quotes from like, I mean, I have quotes from Remedios up here. I have quotes from like Emerson, and I have quotes from like my brother, Shakespeare, quotes that have really hit me so hard at different times in my life, and things I just, want to be guided by. So yeah, that's my wall of Post-its. I'm kind of, bummed to take it down, which is why it's still up there. I don't know how long it will stay, how long Remedios will stay, but yeah.
So it sounds like you're a plotter when it comes to your books.
Oh my gosh, no, I wish I was. Doesn't like everyone who's one or the other wish they were the other? No, I'm a what's it called, a pantser or whatever. I'm a pantser. I write in scenes, but my drafts are relatively sparse. So, I think it was Fitzgerald said, you're either a taker outer or a putter inner. So I'm a putter inner for sure. I mean,
I like that.
Right. That's another way of saying you're either an overwriter or underwriter. So I'm an underwriter. So and my favorite writer is Edith Wharton, and she was an underwriter too. She, I found there was this letter she wrote to her publisher, who was like, where's the draft or whatever? And she was like, oh, I'm just fattening it up. So she was like a putter inner. So most of, like a first draft for me is usually like a little over 200 pages maybe. And then I'm going back, and certainly I'm excising stuff, but I'm also mostly expanding. And then there are other people who overwrite and write a ton, and then their whole editing process is about cutting, right? And you're always, if you're one or the other, you always think the other one is the easier way to be. So like I'm an underwriter, so I'd like, oh, I'd love to have this huge thing where I just have to cut it apart. And then my friends who are overwriters are like, oh, but it's so hard to cut. Like, I wish I, could write more and more and more. So, yeah, so that's kind of how I work.
Oh, so I have learned something about myself tonight. I am an underwriter, but an overthinker. So
same, aren't we all, right?
What if I'm an overwriter and an overthinker all at the same time?
Oh,
I just
yeah.
doomed. Am I damned after?
that just sounds exhausting.
Yeah.
Welcome to my world.
It's like those personality tests, that give you the extrovert, I forget what it's called, but underwriter,
I think
overthinker.
I think it'd be helpful to know what you are in a way. So if you know that you're an underwriter, you're like, okay, it's fine if I feel like I've told the story and it's 180 pages or something, because I know I'm going to go back and expand or add whole chapters or whatever it is, and not have to, I don't know, tense up around that kind of.
And you're right, and that's such a great perspective, because we put so much emphasis on those first drafts. I feel like, especially up and coming writers who are just trying to get their first book published, that they're like, okay, this first draft has to be perfect. It has to be brilliant and shining right from the get-go. And you just have to get the bare bones of the story on the paper, is how I feel that's what a first draft is supposed to be, the bare bones. And if that bare bones is 50,000 words or 150,000 words, the bare bones are there.
It's so true. I really agree. And Jodi Picoult has this great quote where she's like, it doesn't even matter what you write, really, because she's like, I can edit garbage, but I can't edit a blank page.
Yes.
And my prior life, I was a lawyer. I was a corporate lawyer. And what you learn in big law firm is the people who draft the first draft of the briefs are not the most senior lawyers. They're the most junior lawyers, because again, it doesn't really matter that much what the draft says. It's just that the draft exists. And then, it's going to go through a million iterations with all the partners and whatever. But that's why they assigned that kind of grunt work to the, first year associate or whatever it is. So yeah, get those drafts out.
Underwrite and underthink for the first draft.
Overwrite and underthink. Is that what you said?
Well, you can under both for the first draft, and then then you can just let your mind run away while you're drafting the future drafts and see what happens. That works for me. I like that system. I'm taking it. Yeah,
sure. Well, I saw, and there's another famous quote. I think it was either revising is writing. Like, that is the writing, is when you're revising and revising and revising. So
I can understand that, because for me, I'm not a big fan of the drafting process. I don't particularly like it. Like, there's points where I enjoy it if I'm there and I have the scene in my head and I know what I want to get out and it just flows. There are those days, and I love
magic days.
Yeah,
magic days.
And then often I am sitting in front of my computer going, so I'm a writer, right? Like, I write. And it's so very common. But once I get to the revisions, once I have that clay, then I'm just like, all right, let me form the words. Let me play with this. That's where the beauty of writing, I think, comes from, is with the revision process, with the editing.
Yeah, I really, I think that's so true. And, Anne Lamott's super famous book, Bird by Bird, where she's just like, write the shitty, can I say that word? I don't know, first draft. Write that first draft. And just get it out as fast as possible. I was always I'm sure you've read Stephen King's book on writing too. I was always super amazed, because he says, like, he would write those drafts in like 3 to 4 months every day, as fast as he could, just to get the draft out. And then he'd spend like 6 months, 9 months. Like, that's when the real writing came, after that super fast draft came out, So.
Yeah, and I feel like
I
that's
hope I have that right.
it's something like that. I actually have not read that book yet. It's one of the books I've been meaning to get to because everybody loves that book for writing.
I have to say, it's the only Stephen King book I've ever read. I mean, but I love it. It's a great, it's worth your time. Yeah, for sure.
And there's something, I mean, with how much he's, even if you're not a horror literature fan, even if you're not a fan of his writing, there's something to be said for a man who has had such a huge career in the publishing industry that you can get a book like that and take knowledge from it, even if you're not a fan of that genre.
Absolutely agree. And that book, he's very thoughtful,
Mhm.
you know, and he's made that's his life's work,
Mhm.
writing. And yeah, he definitely has worthwhile things to say.
Yes.
I think the one I've read a couple, I think, of Stephen King's book, but the one that really stood out to me, and now of course my mind is like, was that Stephen King? But I'm pretty sure it was Stephen King. Wasn't even a horror story at all, really. It was I have to look up and make sure make sure he wrote it. It was The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. And I'm making sure Stephen King wrote it. Yes, Stephen King. And it was about a girl who got lost in the woods, and all she had was a little radio to keep her company while she was trying to find her way out or get found by the search and rescue book. And I'm wondering, I wonder if that was a different Stephen King. There could be two Stephen Kings. But no. Anyway, that's completely tangential to the conversation. But so let me start that over. Alchemy of a Blackbird came out last month. Is that am I correct in
Yes, right.
remembering that?
Yep. In July, yep.
So have you kind of come down from the pub publishing month? You're still in the publishing month, so has everything started to calm down a little for you?
It has, yes. I just got back, my family, we were in Chicago for the opening of the Varro exhibit there this past weekend. So that was a thrill. That was kind of like the thing that I've been really looking forward to. But I have a swing through Boston, not next week, but the week after, and then mostly some events here and there through the fall. But yeah, it's ramping down, and my kids are going back to school, and I'm looking forward to routine in my house again and getting back to work a bit.
Oh gosh, yeah. We're in the last, I think, week and a half for me too, and it's just I can't do unorganized and chaos, and people sleeping until like way later than they should be sleeping, and staying up way later than they should be staying up, and I've given up, so I'm just waiting for school to start.
Yeah.
But Claire, thank you so much for making time for us. We've had so much fun chatting with you. And
thank you guys. It was a delight. Thank you.
Everyone, if you would like to order your own copy of Alchemy of a Blackbird, as always, check out our show notes. You'll find the link to our bookshop on bookshop.org. As always, bookshop.org supports our wonderful writers. It supports the podcast, but most importantly, it supports all of the wonderful indie bookstores out there. And I think you should leave up your Post-it wall, because I love it.
I probably will. And you know what? It'll get revised. This is
right.
The draft. It'll get edited.
So the next time we interview you, there's just going to be a whole wall.
It will have expanded.
It will, for sure.
Well, thank you guys
so much. Thanks so much, guys.